Danny knew immediately that this would be annoying. Mom and Dad, Frank, Tina, the hell, Mr. and Mrs. Alonso. Her parents, brothers, sisters, and good-natured neighbors were all waiting for her in the house where she grew up, sitting on chairs arranged in a semicircle in front of the only entrance to the living room. Her steps slowed, but she continued to follow her mother, who led her in from the doorway, even though she began to turn her head from side to side. All that's missing is, and here it is, when Danny's father slid behind his wife and eldest daughter, silently blocking the way back, crossing his massive arms over his chest and frowning in that way. He always knew how, so that she felt like she was about to admit things that even I didn't know. What I had done wrong, then the last doubts disappeared. Mom, you didn't say something in the invitation. Your famous peanut butter pie, and apparently it comes with some intervention. Too much for one day. If it means anything, I just wanted some pie, but they made it clear to me that I had to be here too. What did you say, Mom? Her younger brother, Frank, as always, tried not to laugh, seeing the comedy of the situation. We're going to find out if your big sister has been switched. He continued to giggle until his mother came up to him and pinched his arm. Oh, what the hell, I'm not the one who suddenly began to live like the wife from Vultures. Under the gaze of almost everyone, he simply rubbed the bruised place, one of hundreds over the years, muttering that the pie better be the most delicious in the world. Honey, your brother, he is who he is, but he really worries. Mrs. Alonso, essentially a second mother to Danny and her siblings throughout their youth, did not have an ounce of amusement in her dark brown eyes. We're all worried. You haven't been yourself lately, to put it mildly. You're just crazy, Danny. Tina, the youngest in the family, even in her 30s, had a clear idea of what was right and wrong, and was never, ever shy about speaking her mind. Vultures, she chuckled. You make them look like bohemians. I think I understand that this may seem strange from the outside. Danny raised her hands, palms up, and spread them to the sides. But interference? She focused on her mother, knowing for sure that she was the one who initiated this event. Come on, I'm just a little reserved now. I'm not an addict who lost all my money in a casino or anything that would actually justify. Are you safe? Father, as always, asked what he needed to know. He doesn't force you, doesn't threaten you, doesn't hurt you. Don't finish that sentence, Dad. Danny immediately closed. One more word in this damn set, and I will literally jump through your window and run so that you will never find me again with him. Honey, this just doesn't seem like you. Her mother, as always a good housewife, pulled out a chair for Danny. Of course, right in the center of the semicircle of condemnation. We didn't raise you like that. We can't understand how. She gritted her teeth and took a deep breath to compose herself. We all saw you at the party last week, how you just stood next to him the whole time. The head is lowered, the mouth is closed, and how he, every minute or so, touched your back too. Guide you, I guess. He constantly pushed you where he wanted you to go. Tina shouted it out, unable to stop herself. Like a shepherd dog. She narrowed her eyes. By the way, to say herding dog is how I put it diplomatically. That was kind of... Frank scratched his head, wincing guiltily. Even I was confused by it. Danny simply chuckled, vaguely, and then focused her attention on the silent participant. The venerable Mr. Alonso has dark, reddish-brown skin, carefully styled silver hair, and a glittering golden cross hanging down to the middle of his chest. And you? I am withholding judgment for now, Danny. His eyes sparkled, but his voice did not reflect this. I'm holding back, but I'm ready if necessary, depending on what story you tell. He cast a long glance at the rest of his accomplices. When she finally gets the opportunity to tell it, Danny nodded, mostly to herself, and sat down, on the chair that her mother still stood holding for her. She ran her pale fingers through her black hair and sighed. Fine, I will accept this in the spirit in which you intended it all, that you love me and want the best for me, and not the way it looks. Like you're gonna time me up and lock me in the basement for reprogramming. With that satisfied for the time being, her family settled into their seats, although her father was still conveniently blocking the exit and prepared to pretend to listen long enough to maintain a veneer of politeness before unleashing his holy judgment on her. Fine, you yourself wanted this. Okay, guys, I'll tell you my story. I'll tell you why I am who I am now and why I don't regret it for a second. She looked at them intently, making sure that her words were absolutely clear. Not one single damned second. They didn't like it, but to their credit, they didn't interrupt. She nodded again. Okay then, I guess I should start with what I did. Despite the confidence she tried to put into her voice inside, she was full of doubts. I have never admitted this out loud, just like that right away. But it had to happen. Danny looked at them all one by one. Remember you asked for this? Once we crossed that threshold. Well, maybe you should give up on what you were hoping to achieve, right away. And with that, she began her journey. The last person I expected to see was Virginia, all dressed up in an elegant, tasteful evening dress, not just before Easter. For someone of her means, it is almost touching how much she loves this sweet little holiday. Loves to organize egg hunts, decorate everything, and of course, eat chocolate. For her to appear out of nowhere that night while I was walking through the woods around this huge mansion, it didn't make sense unless she was sent. Crap, I got caught. Well, then it had to happen sooner or later, and I had been preparing myself for this final leap for a long time. Jin. I pretended to remain unperturbed, nodding to my husband's sister in greeting, not quite looking at her and trying, perhaps successfully, not to express contempt. I always tried to accept her for who she was, sweet and kind, but it was difficult. She was everything I wasn't, tall, slender, smooth and rough, like an old marble statue in Rome or something. Of course beautiful, but I am also beautiful, and if I had ever had any doubts, then the legions of men who, at the sight of me, literally stuck to my chest like a magnet to iron, would have dispelled them. A legion of men is of course not entirely accurate because there were also women among them, but their number was huge and their gaze was unwavering. It was almost comparable to the way they looked back at me twice when they finally looked up at my face, as if they couldn't believe I was the complete package. No, I did not envy Virginia's beauty. I envied her sophistication. There was a dancer's grace in her walk, poetry in her feelings, and I never felt that my simple mind itself could reach her. What's worse, she had the same confidence that he had confidence, what I considered mine until this very moment, that I planned to continue to squeeze as much out of my husband as possible. But no matter what, I knew that I would quickly adapt. Dramatic change is something I suddenly discovered that I was quite good at. Virginia did not respond to my greeting. She simply looked me up and down, appreciating my tight red dress, the slit of which went up almost to my navel, exposing not only my leg covered in tights, but also my bare buttock. How good it was. My screaming red challenge to the world. But to be honest, she didn't even look like she was criticizing the outfit, so I decided to take it upon myself. I took a deep breath and puffed out my chest. That's quite a specific school lecture you were assigned to, Danny, Virginia said, pursing her lips tightly as I slowly pushed my breasts back into place. The dress code here is clearly eccentric. Is it called elementary school teacher couture or something like that? Either way, it suits you. What was this supposed to mean? Does it suit you? She must have thought I still look like a sad school teacher. She didn't know the new, real me and didn't see how I evolved. She should have immediately attacked me with condemnation when she first noticed me in this dress given to me. Why is she so calm? What kind of game is she playing? Why hide, Jin? I waved my hand at the elaborate, absolutely gigantic mansion behind her. There's no point in hiding what it is. Where are we? The only question is how long it will be before Lucian's guards get you out of here. This question at least has a simple answer. Virginia arched one golden eyebrow and her ruby-red lips curled slightly. Never, I was actually sent, as you probably already guessed, but I was invited. Her grin became even wider. Technically, I have a standing invitation that I never wanted to use after the first time. Until today. Until the moment when your twin brother begged you for what? I realized that I really didn't know the answer to this question, and I asked it sincerely. Save me, maybe. Virginia still didn't show an ounce of anger, judgment, or even impatience, and it was driving me crazy. I think a wrinkle finally appeared on her flawless forehead. He remains the same as he has always been, as he cannot help but be. But he also realizes something. From my part, I know exactly what I'm going to do. Get out of here, I answered dryly. No, and don't think you have enough influence to make this happen, even despite your situation with Lucian. My position gives much more, even now, believe me. She turned and glanced over her shoulder, clearly noticing the noisy party coming from the house. We're going to take a closer look at everything. I'll show you what this place is. I couldn't help but laugh. In other words, you will show me a bunch of things that I already know, but with unnecessary comments. Partially correct, Miss Allen. What would that mean? I just shrugged. You know what? Okay, let's see. I was told to occupy myself for a while until Lucian was ready to receive me. So who cares? Honestly, I've always admired you, Jean, which fueled envy, of course. And I have a feeling this will be the last time we talk. We can make the most of it. Maybe we'll both learn. Virginia just smiled and extended her hand, bending her elbow. I blinked, then Mort grinned at her confidence, took her arm, and let her lead me like she was pulling me onto the dance floor. Thanks to my recent awakening, I could admit that her proximity was pleasant to me, and I took advantage of the minutes of the walk to fantasize. Slightly whetted my appetite, which I really didn't expect to satisfy right now, but still enjoyed it. For some reason, we stopped in the hallway, where a bunch of people from Lucian's team, who were only allowed on this party's level, were huddled together. They were in fact hangers-on, as I was told, who accidentally became involved in Lucian's affairs. In my opinion, it was shameful. There was a certain innocence in their manners and manner of communication that attracted me. Like tender veal meat, it was once me. Virginia, nodding and smiling at more people than I could count, revealed this little fact. This is where I first got into the organization, until I was able to break deeper. She patted the shoulder of one particularly smart-looking, older man who raised his glass of champagne in recognition. There are a lot of good people here who were simply pulled into Lucian's orbit through no fault of their own. I snorted. Are you drawn in? I got just a few pieces of all of it, and it changed my life. There's no chance these people on the periphery aren't hungry for more. Partially correct, Miss Allen. I contained my irritation and continued to fall over Virginia into the next room, quickly and happily leaving this boring company behind, with a much more visually appealing collection of partigores, not to mention much more. Next room, draped in lovely reds and pinks, in an aesthetic attempt to tone down the sharp shine of the metal, was much closer to my taste. Well, at least my tastes were by then. I couldn't say for sure that this matched who Virginia knew me to be, but that was her problem. I was going to make sure of this. Quite by accident, I caught a passerby dressed, by the way, in a toga and even barely. Hokey, I know, but it served my purpose as well. Not only the outfit, but also the fact that it was worn by a woman at least a good 15 years younger than me. With a very brief but meaningful glance at Virginia, I turned by impromptu object lesson around to face me and kissed. I completely forgot Virginia. Damn, I forgot where I was. Then they reminded me in an extremely rude manner. So guess you ladies don't have to go far. I thought someone like you would go straight to Lucian, but it seems you've let this room get the better of you. Someone like me. I looked at what had caught his attention, my wedding ring. I was more than angry, but I didn't know why. Was he judging me or something? Why the hell does he care that I'm married? This couldn't be the first time he met a woman in my situation, or a man for that matter, not in this place. Moreover, what did you do? It doesn't matter if he cares. Still, I was annoyed. It was as if he was catching me saying something judgmental. Condemn yourself. Fuck off, Marcos. Oddly enough, Virginia's harsh words did a lot to bring me back to reality. Her supportive hand on my shoulder actually made me pull back a little from the harsh beauty and her necessary touches. You're not going to get her to admit anything, damned, you old hypocrite. Unless you want to tell me we're stuck here in a damn villa, forbidden to go see Lucian. A man named Marcos, coordinator, bouncer, looked like he wanted to slap us both stupidly. No, scratch it. He wanted to slap Virginia. However, what happened was that he contented himself with a grunt and a glare, and then silently pointed to the other end of the red room, to the passage, further into the estate. He was speechless for at least a moment before muttering, "Worthless ones who cannot remain faithful to save their lives." I really hated this guy and really wanted to leave. I hurried next to Virginia so we could continue onward. Maybe my sister-in-law has finally accepted who I have become. Maybe not. All I knew was that the night was far from over, and there was much more to come. You looked very perky. Virginia inexplicably dropped the compliment by throwing her arm around me again. I blinked, caught off guard. Thanks. I found my smile again. Fuck Marcos. Lost in my thoughts, I barely noticed that we were walking along the periphery of a large dining room and many participants. The thing is that there was no menu food. There were illegal substances scattered on the long table. Of all my new entertainments, this is the one I've only dabbled with so far. However, this was yet another example of an existence I had never even dreamed of until Lucien came into my life. I just couldn't imagine ever having the opportunity to indulge in this while chained to Beatty. Moreover, Beatty never forbade me to do anything like that. He didn't have to. It just wasn't an option with him. Together with us, it's like trying to get a bear to eat an elephant. Completely different worlds. Lives are at stake, Virginia said, pointing her chin at another group, a collection of the most garishly dressed men and women I had ever seen. They invent new ways to squeeze everything out of this world. Then everyone will do it on their own. Do you know them? I frowned. During the time I spent with Lucien, I knew that he avoided talking about his connections and contacts, and I didn't care. He was a powerful man, but he was also a philanthropist, a giver, and I was happy to be drawn to him with all my soul, even to the parts of him that I could not see. But these people made me anxious. I know about them. I know that Lucien is the only person who can get a penny out of them, and they hate him for it. Almost as much as they hate the fact that they can't help but come here. But he squeezes out those pennies, I smiled triumphantly, and they stay on track. Everything Lucien did just made me melt. This man was a revelation. Virginia shrugged. Struggle. Exciting, I guess, for a while. Her eyes narrowed. The way they let their hatred simmer inside, she shivered slightly. At best, they will choke in this, but more often they choke everyone else. She shook her head. You don't understand what the world is until you lose it. World, don't make me laugh. It's boring and we both knew it. Virginia was painfully transparent in her attempt to make me. Remember, I guess it was no use. What could compare to this place, with this existence? All your whims, all your pleasures, all your delights are at your fingertips. And it all revolves around such a powerful axis as Lucien, who knows what you are and what you need. Nothing else, no one else could compare. There was no time spent with anyone else. No wonderful holidays, no quiet moments at sunset, no warm evenings by the fireplace, no endless easy laughter, no. People need more. I deserve more. I deserve it. I've given enough. I gave it away, lost in my own thoughts. I didn't even notice that we had already passed through the side door, although Virginia deliberately directed us towards it. Behind the door, we found ourselves outside again, but not in the forest, around the mansion, but in an enclosed courtyard. It took a few seconds to realize that there was a large, very beautiful sauna in which the stoves were working at full capacity to produce enough steam for the huge room. I cast a questioning glance at my companion, hoping that maybe we could stop by for a minute. The thought of meeting Lucien with a thin haze of sweat on his body seemed very tempting to me. And to be honest, I had a strange feeling that it would be good for me to have a good cleanse. But that was not the case. Virginia didn't even slow down, just glanced at the vacationers wrapped in towels cooling off after the steam room. Those lying on the sun loungers, however, did not hide their interest in her. Virginia, I never thought I'd see you here again. One of the men, a handsome older man with a thick, curly beard, beamed when he noticed us. I was sure that as soon as you left, it would be forever. A frame. Virginia simply nodded without stopping, although strangely she slowed down a little. This is Danny Allen. The man, Ephraim, didn't seem to care. He just waved his hand as if dismissing. The name vaguely reminds me of something. Wait, Allen? This name certainly reminds me of something. Your brother? He didn't wait for Virginia to answer. What was his name, Bader? Biddy? I answered before she could say anything. I was irritated by his mockery and clenched my left hand as I said his name. His name is Beatty. Oh, yes, a construction worker or a cleaner or something like that. The one you started praising out of the blue. Ephraim ignored me and continued, turning to Virginia with a malicious smile, nudging the woman sitting next to him who was struggling not to laugh. That hero who, saved you. His evil grin became even more malicious. Yes, but Virginia was not looking at him or his toy when she answered. Ephraim continued to chuckle. Damn it, what a pathetic cuckold he must be. But the door is always open for you, Virginia. Memories don't disappear. This time grabbed Virginia's hand and pulled us away. My strange desire to cleanse myself still remained, but all my dirty, voluptuous fantasies had long since disappeared. This raunchy couple made sure of that, at least for now. When we went back inside, the corridor we were walking down was dark, like the lights were flickering or something. I could barely see enough to avoid crashing into the walls. Virginia, of course, knew where she was going and stepped forward again. However, she suddenly laughed softly. There, with Ephraim, a bad blow to the face, yes, before I could answer as if by magic. At that moment, there was a loud slap. We turned the corner, descended into a dimly lit room, and found ourselves surrounded by a variety of leather and rope equipment, just like a ranch. Although this should not have happened, although this room fit well into the general surroundings, what I saw still amazed me and made me stop abruptly with a loud breath. My eyes must have sparkled in the darkness as I watched. "Danny, we need to move on." I jumped, literally jumped, when Virginia touched my shoulder. Hardly believing it, I realized that the unexpected sight of this unbridled rage, this dominance and submission did something to me. It's just death. These people are killing themselves. Virginia couldn't stop piercing these people with her gaze. "You should see this, Danny." "Not at all." I ran my palm over her bare arm to feel the goosebumps there. I couldn't help myself. I still felt an irresistible urge to touch her. I've never seen anyone so alive. I assure you that every nerve in their bodies is on fire right now from what they are doing to... Now my hair is standing on end. Virginia instantly grabbed my hand and intertwined her fingers with mine. It wasn't what I expected, and definitely not the kind of touch I wanted. But it felt nice. Nobody gives anything away there. This is a massacre. Rough. It's a pity. Each of them thinks they have won, and each of them ignores the fact that just entering here costs them everything. They have nothing to win. She grinned. They don't even have a trophy shelf. Her fingers clenched, and even at home for this shelf, they gave up everything to be. This, and no one but themselves cares about them, even about each other. They reduce themselves to nothing. She tilted her head, looking intently at me. They lead themselves to death. She just couldn't stop. At that moment, I realized that it was better not to argue. To be honest, what she said were just words. Everything is relative. One man's hell is another man's heaven. Do you think so? Virginia's question made me realize I had said it out loud, but I didn't back down. Yes, I think so. You're just throwing out metaphors and analogies, and all I see is a bunch of people who are finally being honest with themselves. Be honest with the world. My guide rolled her eyes with a slight grin and led me further out of this room that had captivated me so much. I couldn't have come up with a better time, even if I tried. Ooh, what a mystery. I waved my hands in a joking gesture, but Virginia surprisingly laughed sincerely. To be honest, I giggled a little too. This whole situation, our goals and who sent her, it all really was a little absurd. However, she was a rather reserved bore, so to speak. And I still had a small hope that as soon as we were in Lucien's presence, everything would change and I could have proper sex with her. There was such a possibility. We were already approaching the end of the party. I knew it. Even a house this big couldn't last forever, and to be honest, I was starting to get a headache. It was all too much. Those nasty bitches. I lowered my hands, which had just been rubbing my temples, and focused on the bitches that Virginia clearly despised. This room was like all the others, quite large, but it looked like a university auditorium, funnel-shaped, and surrounded by rows of seats. It was strange to see an audience, if you could call it, that in the middle of the house, but Lucien was a man of passion and knowledge, so in a way it made sense. Those bitches, both men and women who deserved such a nickname, apparently were. Beautiful. Very beautiful. My recent girlfriend in a toga wouldn't get lost among them, but she wouldn't attract much attention either. Here, among these physically perfect people, she would simply blend into the crowd. They sat in groups, chatting and laughing, looking as if they were telling each other stories or exchanging notes. But the body language and expressions on their perfect faces. Bitches. Yes, sometimes you just... No. I rolled my eyes at Virginia. Okay, what's the lesson this time? It will be you. Her voice was final. No reservations. I placed my hand on my chest in mock theatricality. I flatter myself. I don't know who they are or what they are whispering about, but damn, they do it so smartly. They are merchants and women of easy virtue, Danny. and not in a rational sense, but in one that serves demand. I mean, they are professional seducers, exploiters, professional sellers of lies. Virginia, damn, a tear rolled down her cheek and it shocked me. Not the crying itself, but the fact that it was accompanied by an expression of absolute hatred. This combination was creepy. Very creepy. I mean, everyone lies, Jean. My answer was half-hearted. This time. God, how she looked. This is her torn, exhausted voice. They go out into the community and find victims. Her grip on my arm began to hurt. They make things up, then whisper their stories in your ear, touching your skin in private, or say them into a microphone in front of the whole world. They weave magic as black as the pits where their souls used to be, and use it to fill those pits with the souls of those they deceive. I think I heard my fingers crunch. They only have a tiny spark of life left, and they are desperately trying to fan it out in order to warm themselves up a little and continue on to continue to destroy. This is all that Lucian left them. I pulled my hand out of Virginia's death grip and rubbed it, trying to drown out the pain. A second later, I looked at her again, ready to say something harsh to her, but was stopped by a pair of reddened eyes whose gaze I could only hold for a split second. That's when it finally dawned on me. This was your place. You were here. You were found here. Virginia snorted. If you don't have the honesty to admit it, at least pretend that you have the courage to tell the truth. You know what happened, Danny. This was the same place where my brother, your husband Betty, found me. This, she waved her hand towards the group of conspirators. This is the hole he had to crawl into again and again, until I finally extended my hand to him in response. Although he should have given up a long time ago, I blinked and looked back at these bitches. I didn't have the slightest doubt about Virginia's words, and now they didn't seem so perfect. It was you. I understood what I was saying, but it felt like it wasn't me saying the words. It's more like I'm reading a text that was given to me. You just weren't suitable for this. For what? For a world full of intrigue and paranoia? For a world of psychopathic contempt, parasitism? Was she supposed to be suitable for this? Not everyone. I won't. I couldn't finish the sentence because, frankly, I didn't know what I was going to do or not do. This was the point of my being here. The fact is that Lucian gave me an invitation. Unpredictability. Chaos. The excitement of walking down a road that I had never walked before. As if reading my thoughts, Virginia pointed to a door across the small auditorium. I've never been behind this door. I never went to Lucian in the heart of his home. I don't know what we'll see. I don't know what will happen to you. Well, it's good that I know that. Maybe. I had an idea of what was going to happen based on what Lucian had been telling me. Well, for a long time. Long enough for me to gain confidence, mostly real, and tug on Virginia's hand to lead us through the final door into the place that filled her with terror that she didn't even try to hide. Her quiet sob didn't stop me, straight to the heart, to my new life. The time had come to make the sacrifice I had been preparing for so long, and no little reminders. No fond memories could stop me. The first thing that struck me was the trembling throughout my body. The second thing that struck me was how much I liked it. Of course, the room was strangely cold, in this large, slightly Spartan bedroom. Well, at least there was a bed in the center. However, the cold was not the main thing. As I took my first step across the cold floor toward that bed, covered in soothing whites and blues, I suddenly realized why it was so cool in here. It was a necessity. I was burning inside, and I knew that once I was on that soft mattress, once I gave myself to Lucian, it would take everything in the world not to pass out from heat stroke. I felt it in my bones. It was a deep-rooted instinct. I knew this because he was here waiting for me. Lucian sat, reclining. His legs were covered with sheets up to his waist. His hair was slightly disheveled, in white wings, and he extended his hand to me. His dark eyes were fixed only on me, and his smile was a promise, as if his mouth was ready to devour me. God, how I wanted to become his prey. Danny, Virginia was still holding my hand, but I was trying with all my might to break free. I can't tell you what you don't already know. He is manipulating you. He doesn't even have 2 sides but 3, which he changes to get what he wants. He will destroy your happiness, make you forget who you are, and you will end up hating everything you ever loved. Her voice trembled. It's not just Beatty you're betraying, you are betraying yourself. Please don't do this. Again, I turned around to take one last look at her, a farewell glance. When she furrowed her eyebrows, in confusion I laughed. You mean don't do it again? Do you seriously think this is my first time with Lucian? I can imagine what my grin looked like, how cruel she must have seemed. Jin, he came into my life a few months ago. This is just the first time I came to him myself. I calmed my expression and made a choice. Tell Beatty I swallowed. Tell my husband that he was never good enough, would never be good enough, and let him work on it for the next woman he manages to lure into his life. Lucian's deep, deep laugh rang out as I released Virginia's fingers. I don't remember how I crossed the smooth floor to the bed. For the first time I saw him in full. Before that, all our meetings were secret, so passionate, full of need and desire, but always brief, quick, so that the world does not know about us and what we have become for each other. It was exciting, the most incredible thing I've ever experienced, but it was too empty. Now, that's finally going to change. Now that will change. Now I came to him and not the other way around, and I knew that I would be rewarded. Now was the moment when my life would really begin. What's left? Manipulation by traders and women of easy virtue. The endless vices of people with addiction, looking for new people to humiliate and betray, just to feel life again. If I'm really lucky, they'll leave me alone to dream of a better life. Temptation is like torture. I knew where these sudden thoughts came from. Each of them was like a needle stabbing into me for all these hours, but now they came all at once. I had no idea how they could have appeared while I was having sex with Lucian, but they did, and I couldn't enjoy it. I was a toy, literally and symbolically. I became indifferent. The deal sucked. My incredible moment of clarity showed me this very clearly. I had nothing because I had destroyed everything to get here. And all I could do in the next minute, let alone the next day, week, month, or year, was hope that Lucian would give me enough to satisfy me. Hope without confidence, without any basis in experience with this man. Now I had only one question. Would this cold man who took me want me again? Does he want to raise me from the grave again, like a zombie from a horror movie? Because I literally committed the death of myself, just like Virginia said. Virginia. She was still there. Virginia didn't leave. Despite the tears streaming down her face, which embodied despair and suffering, she did not abandon me. At her brother's request, she stayed when her words, her thoughts, but I heard them in my husband's voice. Behind my lifelessly swaying hand, behind the shine of my wedding ring, I saw my husband's sister, a woman with a face so similar to Beatty's, and she took a step towards me. I made this gesture. I took a step too, and that was enough. The rest happened quickly, even perhaps anticlimactically, sobbing but smiling widely. Virginia took my outstretched hand and helped me out. He let us go, without a word, no sound. This finally put everything in its place, how unimportant I was to him. How quickly, damn quickly, will he find a replacement for me? Hell, he already got what he wanted. He's had enough of me, and now he doesn't need me anymore. The joy of this realization was indescribable. Everything else is just an adornment to the ocean of relief that covered me. So much so that I didn't notice my abandoned dress, didn't notice the doors through which we slipped out, didn't notice those we passed, rushing away on the wave of my freedom. Nothing was more important in that moment than the way Virginia and I ran out of that damned mansion, its gravity weakening with every step, until we finally climbed into the limousine, which she had wisely left waiting for us in the hope that I'll get my sanity back. It was a great feeling that lasted about 5 minutes. Jin, what time is it? I was shaking and wrapped my arms around my naked body when I finally met her gaze fully, causing her to stop digging around for clothes for me. Virginia glanced at the watch, which was hidden somewhere in the car as she pulled away. Around 7:30 in the morning. Why? I laughed bitterly because I wasn't sure that I even knew what a sense of humor was anymore. I just wanted to record the start time. Virginia started dialing a number on her phone, and I knew exactly who she was going to call, but she stopped and asked with a smile, "The beginning of what?" "The beginning of my climb up the mountain." My bitter laughter turned into sobs, and I'm almost sure that the avalanche will cover me long before I reach the top. Virginia didn't answer, but she squeezed my hand as we drove on while she was making a call. God, damn. Danny could only smile a little guiltily at her brother Frank. She nervously ran her fingers through her thick black hair, trying to hide the flush of blush that she knew was creeping across her cheeks at that moment. Frank and everyone else had no idea the story she had just told, the words she had spoken out loud. Well, to call it embellished would be putting it mildly. All the things that happened to her and Lucien, everything she did, flashed through her mind, and her mouth processed it all and softened it, dulled sharp edges. Mom and Dad really don't need to know how their little girl turned into a psychotic sex monster. There's definitely no need to drill down to the minute. She was even more to the right than she herself imagined. I can't, you. Mama Danny straightened up in the chair in which she had practically gone limp during the story, and took a deep breath, trying to calm down. I try my best not to think about the details. She swallowed. These huge gaps, the size of the Lincoln Tunnel. She looked at her husband, sitting behind everyone, with his powerful arms crossed over his chest and his head down, clearly envious of his ability to remain silent. Danny also looked at her father, and she had a completely different feeling. Dad, I'm so sorry. She wanted to say more, but she couldn't even keep looking at him. So she turned her gaze to Mr. and Mrs. Alonso, an elderly couple who still hadn't said a word. Should I continue? Mr. Alonso rubbed the cross that hung around his neck, sighed, and nodded. Like her father, he was a reserved man, although his silence was more self-controlled than deep thought. Over the years, Danny managed to catch hints that her good-natured neighbor had a not-so-decent youth in the past. His wife looked at him with sympathy and then nodded in support. But the doll-like miniature younger sister Tina, damn it, Danny, of course, continue. Tina, without mincing words, waved her arms, nervously turning her pumped-up body in the chair. You still haven't explained why? Why you're still with him, all these things, why you? Her gestures became even sharper with, what the hell is this? Nobody wants to see their idols crumble. Danny always knew that Tina put her on a pedestal, and now that pedestal was buried deep underground. Why am I acting the way I am now? Danny muttered, running her hands over her face and looking up at the ceiling of the house she grew up in. Then she sighed decisively and plunged back into the story. Then everything only gets worse. She closed her eyes, suppressing the pressure building in them. She looked around everyone present, not focusing on anyone in particular. Well, everything happened. Let's get this over with. However, she fell silent again, for a moment before finally forcing herself to continue. Okay, so Virginia and I were dropped off somewhere, and hell, I don't even know where we were. I was just glad that I got rid of Lucien. Glad I saw him the way he was, the way his world was. Damn, before it's too late. Is this even true? Could this be true? What kind of escape did I actually make? It seemed to me that I had climbed out of a hole only to now find myself on the open sea. No direction, lost. What freedom of choice do I have left in my own life? No, I can fix this. I'll find a way to move forward. Well, as soon as I see him, it will be hard. But I'm a smart woman. I am a teacher. After all, even if my students are not PhD high school students, can be tough too. And I was damn good at my job. Well, once upon a time before, I remembered something that, oddly enough, and Gilo, Virginia's driver, told me on the way. He said that it doesn't matter what happened before, and that we should only focus on what's ahead. All that matters is what happens next. Whatever that little proverb meant, whatever the further turned out to be, now I was following Virginia to a nice, secluded house on the shore of a quiet, calm lake. The house was large enough, perhaps, although it was incomparable to Lucien's huge estate. It was like an oasis of peace, an island away from everything. Best feature? I liked it. The only discrepancy was the gate in front of the paved path leading to the house, so luxurious, as if there was something important behind it, which no doubt was the truth. You can stay here? Danny, Virginia patted me cheerfully on the shoulder. It was unconvincing. Obviously, you can stay. I brought you here for a reason, right? I tried to hide the reflexive reaction that her touch caused the first since we left Lucien's house, even after everything we've been through. Or maybe that's why. This touch from my beautiful sister-in-law, not to mention the fact that she is my husband's twin sister, really excited me. Even such an innocent pat. I had a hard time restraining myself from licking my lips when I looked at her, and I almost couldn't help it. I still bit my bottom lip for a moment. Espy, thank you, Jen, for everything. I say this with all my being, but you want to know why I brought you here. Virginia looked at me with sympathy as she opened this luxurious gate with a gold and silver key. Like I said, everything was great. She did not answer my question until she opened the door of the house. Well, ta-da. This didn't surprise me at all. I expected this, knowing for sure what I would have to face as soon as I saw Virginia calling someone in the limousine. But I realized something fundamental. The moment I saw my husband get up from the comfortable chair he was sitting in, I didn't want him here. Don't get me wrong, Beatty is a wonderful person. If that sounds like disdain, that's not what I meant. Everything about him, from his toned figure to his calm appearance, even his hands with the scars and calluses he earned from construction work, is all nice, calming even. He's not a firebrand, but everyone usually feels comfortable around him, but not this time. This time his presence made every muscle, every nerve in my body tense. And it certainly didn't help that he was surrounded by what seemed like all the pastel eggs and bunnies in the world. Virginia's fascination with Easter made the whole scene seem surreal, as if it were all some kind of hoax. That combination made me want to turn around, run back to Virginia's limousine and promise Angelo an endless string pleasures, if only it would convince him to take me away from here. He seemed like a nice guy, but everyone has their limits. I didn't run, no pleasure, no action at all. I stared at Beatty, not knowing what I was waiting for, but definitely expecting something. Scream, waving a finger in front of my nose, my damn name spoken with disgust. Anything, just nothing. Nothing but this look, this expression. Biddy Denny if you want. Virginia looked as awkward as possible as she shrugged. Don't know. You can sit down, I guess. I'll get us drinks. A liter of vodka. I don't know why I said this. Apparently a joke to defuse the situation. But when Beatty froze halfway back in his chair, elbows straight and arms resting, I knew it was a mistake. Is this what it takes for you to talk to me? My husband's first words, and I had no idea how to react to them. There was no anger, no sympathy, just an emotionless question. I realized that I too had tensed, and now we were standing opposite each other like wooden dolls. Although there were such comfortable chairs in front of us. God bless her, Virginia diffused the situation. I have ice and lemonade. Sorry, but I drank all the vodka before I went to loosen. She tried to laugh, but it came out weak and sad. However, it's appropriate. Just please sit down, I'll be back soon. She left, and we sat down. It was a kind of truce. I started fiddling with the sleeve of the dress Virginia had lent me in the limousine. My own red, almost no more than a piece of cloth, was left behind. The dress was beautiful, so I continued to look at it even when I spoke. Beatty, do you want me to talk to you? I forced myself to look at him when he didn't immediately answer and saw that he was sitting with his face in his hands. After a moment, he slowly ran his hands over his face and looked at me. No, yes, both. I need to know, but I will hate knowing it. He snorted, listen to me, maybe you've already driven me crazy. Maybe, I couldn't agree more. But I'm here. Will I deserve at least a little appreciation for this? I have answers to the questions that I know you must be tormenting you. Okay, into the abyss. Betty leaned back and motioned for me to continue. When no, how did it start, I opened my mouth, but he didn't finish. He leaned forward and tried to pin me to the back of the chair with his gaze. And Danny, consider this a confession, no lies, even without subterfuge. Just tell it like it is, so I don't have to guess anymore. 2, to stop floating aimlessly across the ocean. I don't know what you want from me next, but fine. Did he think I knew what I wanted? Everything is fine. I'll tell. I studied that smooth wooden floor, took a deep breath and began. Lucian donates to many charities and organizations, and about a year ago my school became his last choice. It all started so quickly. I could no longer keep my gaze on Beatty and lowered my eyes, pressing my lips into a thin line. When I frowned in confusion, he continued. I'd rather he didn't continue. Listen to Lucian mocking me, playing along with him, coming up with tricks to distract me, avoiding exposure to increase the thrill, fuel, food for the monster. So now you want to comment. Damn, why did I say that? Why with such a sarcastic tone? I wish I could take it back. But Beatty had already risen to his feet, and I had to redouble my defense. Yes, food, this word will do. He fed on me. My body, my mind, my disappearing soul, and I fed on you. I used everything we had to rekindle the flame of my affair. because it made me feel fulfilled. I don't even know what. Rebirth, insight. In those moments, I saw a whole different world, and I just wanted more and more and more to have it shoved down my throat. More and more, until I choke, until the image of the good housewife and teacher dies. I was already on my feet, trembling all over. At that moment, a strong hand grabbed my wrist, and before I knew what was happening, the cold drink was in my hand, and I was gently but firmly seated back in the chair. Her slender fingers lingered briefly on my hand, and Virginia turned to her brother, her soft gaze trying to reassure him. Love, Beatty, this is what Lucian does. He finds love and distorts. What Danny doesn't tell you, but what she knows you don't want to hear is, Jin, no. I gasped, knowing what she was going to say. Although I didn't know how she had discovered my secret, I desperately didn't want her to say a word. Beatty, God. Virginia glanced at me, and then looked back at her brother. She doesn't want to say that Lucian began communicating with her long before that formal event at school. He had communicated with her several months before. She was the intermediary for his donations. He met her through correspondence with her, and with you, with your marriage, with your life together, to be precise. He was slowly destroying everything long before she even met him in person. Please, please stop. I could only whisper it. I'm sure Danny satisfied him physically, but sorry, there are plenty of people like her. She's beautiful, but he could get as good as her with just a snap of his fingers. And I received it many, many times. Virginia's voice became quiet, and she looked out the large window overlooking the calm lake, not looking at me or Beatty. What Lucian really wanted was what he didn't have. He longs for true love, real affection, unpurchased, not forced. He hunts for her like a bloodhound. When he finds his target, he shapes it in his own twisted image. Distorting love, as I said. It holds up a distorting mirror to true love until you feel disgusted and want it to go away. Virginia wiped a tear from her cheek and then tried to hide the movement by taking a sip of her drink. He had already prepared Danny before he even met her. Jean, Beatty extended his hand towards his sister. You never told me how Enid, what happened to her. And I won't tell. Virginia looked intently at her lemonade. Never. After an eternity, she smiled at her brother. Beatty, thank you once again and forever for what you did for me. You reached out to me when I was already sure that no one could. You are one of a kind, even if you don't want to admit it. Apparently that was all Virginia could say at that moment. I felt for her, God, how I felt for her, but at that moment I hated her a little. She probably just took away my last chance for salvation. The last thing I hoped to hide, just words, and everything collapsed. In the beginning, Lucian and I only communicated through emails and phone calls, communication without faces. And that was enough. I was lazy. What else can you call it? I didn't make the slightest effort to be alert, to pay attention to all the little things he suggested, to all the cracks in my shell. Every time he made subtle references to my boring home life or thankless job, I had to stop him. Every time he mispronounced Beatty's name or mistakenly called him a worker, or joked that my husband must thank every star in the sky that I agreed to be his wife. I had to destroy his false admiration, but it was so easy to laugh with him. So easy that I didn't even notice when I stopped laughing with him and started laughing, just like, why didn't you see? Beatty and Virginia both looked at me with apparent incomprehension after that almost whisper. I continued to stare at them, took a sip of my drink, and continued to stare. That's what I was afraid of when Virginia exposed Lucian's campaign. When the illusion disappeared, I gave in to him because I was unprepared and taken by surprise. This right now. Next thing I was going to say, how I killed myself through cruelty and could no longer stop. This went on for months, Beatty. How could you not notice that my nostrils flared and my free hand gripped the armrest of the chair so tightly that the leather began to creak. My little comments got worse and worse. Sarcastic remarks about your work, about you playing with toys or building your Lego sets. Complaints about the ungrateful little bastards I teach or how our house will become my grave. How I became cold, how bad I pretended to be when I curled my lips and they rolled into a contemptuous grin. It was so obvious. Virginia shook her head in shock, but Beatty, my husband, was icy, completely frozen. This is all. God help me. I screamed, throwing the glass with the rest of the drink and jumping up. You don't understand anything. even when I had to go to the clinic to get rid of. You should have known me. You were supposed to be my damn half. Damn it, Beatty. I was drowning in you. You just smiled at me from the deck. Crap. I can't count how many times I humiliated you to your face, hoping that you would call me a woman of easy virtue or a bitch or at least hit me. Danny, no, stop. Virginia again, only her. I could no longer see anything from rage. Virginia intervened again, only her. I was furious and could no longer see anything in front of me. Every step I took led me along a winding road, and with every turn I saw less and less of the place from which I started. Do you have any idea what Lucen's mansion was like? Why the hell was he alien? Strange, strange. No sane person could have chosen this place for himself, but when I received his invitation, I rushed there at full speed with my arms open. This is what I've come to. That's how deep I've fallen. Danny, you made a choice. You must accept. I turned sharply to Virginia and hissed. When? When did I make my choice? When did the school appoint me as his donation liaison? No. When did I instinctively revert to the manners my parents taught me to avoid calling him a jerk? Not either. In which of the hundreds of small exchanges that caused me excitement did I choose to betray everything that was dear to me? Maybe it was when my hormones began to boil, as soon as I saw his perfect body to match his sensual voice. Seriously? Do you think at some point I just nodded and said, "Time to have sex"? My arms hurt from how hard I swung them up and down. I started literally jumping on the spot. In another life, these twitches could have led to something completely different, but now it seemed obscene, which only made the situation worse. Maybe I made a choice between everyday life, household responsibilities, and work. Like I sat down, wrote down all the pros and cons, and chose my preferred option. September 25th, betray everything and everyone. Seriously, I couldn't. Damn, I had to. My head shook as if I was looking for support, looking around, but found nothing. You needed someone who would understand. Virginia also rose to her feet and took a step towards me. You needed someone who would finally know his name, who would understand exactly who interfered in your life, who came back and perhaps used you for some petty revenge of his own. Someone who realizes that your behavior is not just a phase or a whim and will do something about, right? Someone. We both looked at the motionless, silent block of stone sitting in front of us, and to myself I summed up Virginia's song. I needed someone who would love me enough to overcome his belief in me. God, what was I? I collapsed exhaustedly back into the chair. My body was completely exhausted. Now it was my turn to cover my face with my hands. Guilt, responsibility, love, hate, degrees of depravity, moments of awareness, it was all a tangled knot in which I did not see any loose ends. Everything seemed hopeless. After a few meters, but as if after 1,000 miles, Beatty exhaled noisily and stood up. Although I wanted with all my being, I did not raise my head to look at him. I was just so afraid. What? Oh, I would have time to think about this list. But now there was one thing. Hi. This was enough for the state apparatus, as they say. Maybe it was because they were twins, but I got the feeling that there was some kind of silent communication going on between my temporary housemates. With Virginia still stroking my hand, Beatty headed down the hallway, probably toward the bedrooms. I only looked up at him when I was sure that he had turned away. Understand, I didn't find the courage or a grain of hope within myself. Nothing so positive. I was just curious. I wanted to see him, needed it. He froze as if he sensed my gaze. He didn't say a word for a long time, probably the longest moment of my life, but still in the end he turned his head slightly to the side. You still made one choice, Danny? Otherwise you wouldn't be here. He shrugged. It's just a pity that I don't know if it makes any difference. With that, the man who was still somehow my husband moved on to what I hoped would be a few hours' merciful oblivion for him. But for me, these few hours will be completely different. The first ray of the rising sun that hit I told me that morning had finally come. Hooray! My joints were cracking, my bones were aching, and my muscles were trying to kill me at nothing. The very moment when I thought about getting up from the sofa where I spent a sleepless night. I walked into Virginia's kitchen, rumpled and tired in a borrowed dress, desperate for a cup of coffee to help me recover, and I laughed as I realized how much it mirrored my life now, craving something harmful if it would help me forget who I have become. Success, coffee, failure, company. She stood behind me, and I knew it was Virginia. I drank without turning around, but finally I spoke. I envy you so much, Jean, you know. Hearing a short questioning sound, I continued. I needed her to hear it. Our rescues may look the same from a distance, but their similarities end there. One more quiet sound, and that was enough for me to finish. Your salvation came with redemption. I have no idea how you and Beatty, how you managed to restore everything. I shook my head. Okay. Yes, I know you couldn't get everything back, Enid. Yes, I'm really sorry, but damn, you gave back so much. You're still human. Your brother loves you just as much as before. Hell, I think he even trusts you. I threw my head back and laughed joylessly. Do you want to know the truth? Right here, right now. I really think I'd be willing to fight you if it would give me my life back, like winning a trophy. What the hell kind of abomination is this? The laughter went on a little longer than it should have, and I had to force myself to stop. It was replaced by sobs that sounded rather pathetic, but it was still better than laughter. I hate myself, honestly. I hate this impulse, and I hate that I got to such a point that it could arise at all. But this is where I find myself, and all I can do, hell, all I want is not. I trailed off, unable to find the words to completely shut myself up. Know what? That deep voice shut me up better than any words. I turned around sharply, spilling my coffee in surprise, as if he had shouted, "Boo." He was so quiet that I was sure it was Virginia who came up to me. And now, face to face with Beatty without intermediaries, I was completely lost. I could not formulate either a thought or an answer to his question. Honestly, I didn't even realize what the question was, so I just choked. What? Elegance and eloquence are definitely not my thing. Isn't it, Danny? Beatty tilted his head to meet my gaze. What do you want? You're about to say this when you thought I wasn't here. You were about to let your guard down, or has this moment already passed? My lips moved, but no sounds came out. Beatty. Was he really offering something? At that moment, I allowed myself to fully realize what I had been avoiding in my thoughts for so long. I followed Virginia, here with one thing in mind, catharsis, but not for myself. I really thought that all I would do was give Beatty answers, let him blow off some steam, let him scream and call me every horrible and fair name possible, force him if he had to, and then nothing. I couldn't imagine the future beyond this. Maybe I'll pick up the pieces of my destroyed life, put them together so as not to completely fall apart. This is the kind of martyr I imagined myself to be. I saw it then, as if in some kind of exit from the body. I replayed the previous day in my head, like I was a fly on the wall. What I said, what I never said, I'm sorry. How could I say this? How could I blatantly look at a man who meant everything to me, and whom I used as if he were a cheap commodity, and ask or even beg him to, what? Forgive me? Open your arms to me and pretend I wasn't who I was. No, I was going to suffer. I was going to distance myself from him, from everyone, and feel every painful wound that I had inflicted on myself. I was a woman of easy virtue, a traitor, a pathetic person, and I had to carry the weight of my world on my shoulders. I was going to become Saint Danny Allen, patroness of the Jezebels, a pitiful example to everyone of what weakness and failure were, how the consequences must be endured without a single second of relief. What do you want? Beatty repeated his question without any malice, and at that moment I felt the door slowly closing on me. The stream of light that I didn't even realize was illuminating me in my black dungeon began to narrow. How can I say this? My cheeks were wet, and my jaw was shaking so hard my teeth were chattering. How can I demand anything more from you? I can't. Biddy, his name from my lips was like a funeral hymn. The stream of light narrowed to a strip. My husband tormented me with sadness, showed me hope. He tied me up with golden threads and pulled me so hard that it seemed as if my arms were going to be torn off my body. I didn't lie, it hurt. It hurt so much that I didn't think I could stand it. How could he? How did he do it? How was this possible? Just tell me, Danny. I refused to look at his face, but he sounded so tired. Take a step, I'm sorry. These words did not come from the conscious part of my mind. They were the result of complete surrender, absolute surrender. The strip of light. When my eyes opened, I heard a light, relieved chuckle, and to my surprise, I answered him. Oh, my dearest, dearest man. He didn't even know that I only gave him a small trickle. There will be a flood next. Forgive me, damn it, forgive me, please don't leave me, Biddy. Please remember who I really am deep down inside, and I will remember that too until I die, and I love you so much, and you should kick me out and find someone who isn't crazy. But if you won't do this, I'll never leave, and I don't. Oh, damn. In the distance, I heard a joyful, laughing sound. That wasn't my husband's, better late than never, Gene. But I heard the same sound from him, and in that moment I jumped, literally and figuratively. I crossed the couple of steps that separated us, found myself in his arms, and buried my face in his chest. My every movement was filled with wild, desperate, completely new hope. When his arms wrapped around me, I honestly think I passed out for a few seconds while he held me up. The streak of light exploded, and I was once again immersed in its warmth. It was so warm. I wasn't there. Long enough, not exactly alone, but I couldn't complain when Virginia joined us and got tangled up in a tight hug with us. Just imagine, just a few hours ago, her proximity would have made me feel desired, but now it just felt good. Damn, that's even great. Without the veil of lust clouding my senses and causing me to see in Virginia's features what my soul craved, I was free to love her as she deserved. She became my sister again, finally. Forever, this remained to be seen. I had to admit it. She and Beatty had always been one, and my future with him, despite this fragment of reality, was far from certain. I did everything I could. I threw away my damn all. I was just one big, naked, vulnerable nerve cell, and a slight gust of wind could cause me unbearable pain. Using all the strength I had left, I slipped out of the Allen's embrace to look at my husband in all his integrity. And of course there was weariness hidden behind his smile, open bewilderment. And that, I can honestly say, that it brought me more relief than anything I've ever known. Even more than the feeling of him responding to my desperate embrace. Strange, isn't it? No, I immediately understood what this meant. We will make this journey into the unknown together. We will use Virginia's silver and gold key to step through the beautiful gate outside the window together, hand in hand, repentant and forgiving, guilt-ridden and forgiving. Repentant and reconciling. Well, you get the idea. Biddy, I carefully began to run my finger up and down his arm, like a child who is about to ask for something sweet that he definitely doesn't deserve. I can't believe I'm going to say this out loud. I took a deep breath and just blurted out the inconvenient but inevitable truth. I have absolutely no idea how to fix everything in front of you. I don't even know where to start. So I'm sorry, I'm so sorry I have to put this burden on you. I dared to look at him from under my dark eyelashes. Please tell me, please. My husband looked at me with his sapphire eyes for a long time before answering. I think this story will end happily because my eyes work. In contrast to their sister's gesture, his hand motion towards the modestly dressed Danny was the opposite of dismissive. This was the gesture of a lawyer presenting evidence in court. Ladies and gentlemen, jury exhibit a while the others fidgeted in their seats. Danny smiled brightly at Frank. I love you to death, brother, but happiness is relative. She turned to the others, to her parents, and Alonzo's family. Sorry, but I need everyone's agreement because I'm not going to censor myself anymore. Danny couldn't get rid of the haunting images of what she had done, but she softened it in her stories. And I will definitely throw poisonous bile at anyone who interrupts me. As I begin, I will finish, and you will simply have to remain silent. For a while, everything seemed to freeze while everyone conferred. Mr. and Mrs. Alonzo were whispering to each other, but her mom and dad just looked at each other for a long time. Danny was surprised. She knew that if their roles were reversed, her burning curiosity would not leave a shadow of doubt. The fact that they were seriously considering the possibility of not getting a full understanding was an indication of how frightened they were of her current life. Not a good sign. After a good minute, her father answered, which surprisingly was unexpected for Danny. Honey, you better finish, because I have something to promise myself. If I don't like what I hear or don't hear, our family will be destroyed. So it's better to say everything that needs to be said. And here it is, this hint. Danny loved her father with all her heart, but had no illusions about his philosophy of life. Finish what needs to be finished, no matter the consequences. She has probably never met a more anti-political person. She might have thought of him as a big old crusty bear if he hadn't actually promised that he would seriously harm the man who was now everything to her. This was something she couldn't come to terms with. Father, all of you understand me. The tendons in Danny's neck tensed. This won't end the way you imagine. This won't happen. I won't allow this, and I will make you pay if you react incorrectly. Lord have mercy. Mrs. Alonso gasped as soon as she saw Danny's face. Her husband squeezed his small golden cross even more tightly, and his own neck began to resemble taut steel cables. But they were able to restrain themselves. Just finish it, Danny, her mother whispered. We're in Schrodinger's box, right? She ignored the surprised looks caused by her uncharacteristic rudeness and laughed bitterly. Our family is both whole and destroyed until your last words reveal to us what the poison has done. She put her hand on her husband's twitching bicep. I promise we won't kill you. Diplomatically, and to be fair, out of necessity, Danny ignored the fact that her mother had promised nothing more. Okay, they wanted it themselves. Okay, she said she made herself more comfortable in her chair and prepared to make everyone uncomfortable. So there I was in my husband's arms, wishing with all my being that he would rip off my borrowed dress. From everyone's pained expressions looking at her, Danny knew she had started on the right foot. But this didn't, and I knew it as soon as Beatty was able to pull away from my longing, needy embrace. Danny, I can't trust you one bit. Have you ever had the feeling that someone you thought was pulling you up to heaven with him suddenly threw you off the top of the mountain, tearing off his human mask and turning into a monster just waiting to laugh, evilly, at the last moment before you turn into a bloody stain 5 miles below? No, just me, and I can't stop loving you with all my being. When did you have the feeling that your flight turning into a blur was suddenly interrupted? Not by a monster, but by someone who was not a monster. And now you despise yourself for what you felt before. No, just me. What does this mean? Batty Virginia stepping back a couple steps to give a space, and in her own kitchen narrowed her charming eyes and bowed her beautiful head on that graceful swan neck. Okay, maybe there's still something left of the life I'm trying to escape. That moment with her at Lucian's estate. Anyway, her question was not provocative. This was an honest request for an explanation. Their gazes revealed them as twins as they silently stared at each other for long seconds. Hell, it seemed to me that they were even blinking at the same time, when they, still without saying a word, got up together and went into another room. I felt a little lost. I had known them both for so many years that none of this was surprising to me, even a pleasant reminder of old times. But that didn't make my sudden loneliness any easier. That didn't make my hunger for answers, for a hint of a path forward, any less intense. For some reason, I just stared at the clock on the wall. Maybe it was a mini punishment of sorts to force myself to feel every second that ticked by. Or maybe my subconscious mind was trying to prepare me for what it knew was going to happen. In any case, it seemed like an eternity before I was called into the living room, where I had to appear before my husband and sister-in-law, sitting in their places, like an intercessor before a court waiting to see whether his request would be accepted. Dana, we're leaving you. Beatty's face didn't give away a single hint of his feelings, right until the moment when I was one step away from collapsing on the floor in a puddle of tears and snot. And then his eyes flew open and he jumped to his feet. For a month, damn it. He took a step towards me with his hand outstretched. But when he saw that I sank into a chair and did not fall through the ground, he stopped, frozen in place. Then he walked away. For a month, Beatty glanced at his sister and then returned to my trembling figure. You, if you agree, you will stay here. There's enough food here, Virginia assured, but her voice was weak. At least that's something. She sounded apologetic, but not hesitant. And a lot of things, too, do you agree? My husband interrupted his sister and literally pinned me to the chair with his icy blue gaze. I swallowed my own green eyes, darting restlessly from side to side. Beatty, I don't even know what you're talking about. At that moment, call it another intervention from my subconscious. I just killed what I was going to say by slamming my mouth shut as tightly as I should have held my feet for the past year or so. One confident nod. Here's my real answer. The look of surprise came and went on Beatty's face, but I could tell. I hoped that he was impressed. Then he became a little embarrassed. It was damn cute. Ha, well then, full disclosure, I'm making this up as I go along. He scratched the back of his head, trying to collect his thoughts. Jin thinks it's still a good idea. Okay, his eyes scanned the room. Okay, so yeah, we're leaving. Right now, we have nothing to collect. I clenched my teeth as I stood up, but I couldn't hide my anxiety. When I extended my hands to him, he stepped back, raising his own hands in a gesture to stop. No, Danny, sorry, but we're ending here for now. A month all alone, too. To really feel myself, think, make a decision. He looked down again so we can both make a decision. That's it. I could hardly believe that such a significant moment had happened so quietly. Beatty gave me another long look. Virginia patted me on the shoulder as she walked past, and then they were gone. And the only reminder that they even existed was the sound of Virginia's limousine driving away down the dirt road back into the world. I followed them in a daze after, some time, not believing that all this really happened. I stood there, I don't know how long. She just blinked. When the midday sun began to irritate me, I went back inside, and then I just stared at the wall. That month, it was something. First day, well, it still makes me smile. Virginia said she didn't have to worry about the immediate needs, and she wasn't lying. But the finer details of what she considered essential were never discussed. First things first, what the hell should I wear? I ran away from Lucian in the clothes my mother gave birth to, met Beatty in the dress she gave me. But a search of all the closets and chests of drawers in the cottage yielded nothing. Apparently, Virginia either brought the clothes with her, or I looked out the window at the lake that stretched to the horizon. It shimmered in the sun, and in this part of the world, even in April, I knew how nice it would be to swim there. I distinctly remember smiling and then muttering, "Oh, you cunning fox." She threw off the only piece of clothing in the area for several miles, ran her hands over her naked body, enjoying an unexpected, even dizzying feeling of freedom, and ran from the house to the water. The jump from the small pier gave me enough time to make sure I was following in Virginia's footsteps. This moment was the last one I was sure of for a very long time. The swim was amazing, both cathartic and distracting, but it couldn't last forever. And that night I got my first glimpse of my new existence. Food, thoughts, dream. Yes, there were books, but walks could be done either in high-heeled shoes, and these were my only shoes, no, thank you, or in what my mother gave birth to. And natural nudity seems romantic only until you prick your heel on the fifth stone or branch. Although I must admit the rest of the time it was amazing. God, how I loved just being there. Very quickly my thoughts became dark. I was stuck in my own head, living day after day, and sometimes even minute after minute in the past, in memories about what I did, who I was. I couldn't escape this. The montage of these events played out again and again and again. There was a moment. Lord, there was a moment when I had the thought that everything was better than helplessly experiencing my fall. Even relive it again. I mean, as soon as I can, I'll leave the cottage and just leave everything behind. I started telling myself that I really had no choice but to accept that I was cursed and leave. Go back to him. I knew he would accept me again because he was always waiting, triumphant in the cold. Just like I said, darkness. But it gradually dissipated. I made her dissipate. At first I tried to shake it out of myself through a bunch of physical exercises, exile through training. It didn't work, but I loved the way it made me feel, and even more the way I looked a couple of weeks later. It's hard to feel bad about yourself when you can see your own abs. Then I got down to real work. As part of the behavioral feedback, I began to force my thoughts to focus on the good whenever there was a hint of darkness. When Lucian's face appeared in my imagination, it was as if I were molding him from clay and turning him into the image of Beatty. When my treacherous brain reminded me of Lucian, I plunged into memories of my wedding night with Beatty. During this month, the teacher taught herself lessons, and she was a diligent student. I forced myself to see my triggers. I faced my weaknesses. I dispelled my illusions. For the first time in my life, I was alert. I was disciplined. I made myself my own slave, you might say. I prepared myself by rebooting to factory settings to as blank a page as I could achieve. And it's a good thing I did, because when Beatty came back, he brought with him the biggest piece of chalk in the world. He also came by boat, on a large yacht, which was forced to anchor in the middle of the lake, while a small boat, well, I don't know what it's called, took him to the cottage. He arrived at night, probably to catch me sleeping so that they could come closer and watch me. It makes sense. but I never asked. All I know is that I was awake when he arrived because the month was over, and I knew he would keep his word and be back before midnight. God, I can still see this picture. He stood while one of Virginia's men steered the boat. The full moon behind him bathed him in silvery light, illuminating everything around him, creating a symbol of purity that I had never seen in my life. Admiration is not even close to the right word to describe my feelings then. Perhaps sublime, maybe. All I know is that my tears flowed as I ran out of the house, naked in front of him in every way. He came back to me. I was no longer trapped in the depths of the earth. He stepped off the boat and seemed to absorb me with his eyes, pleased with what was offered to him, a wife who did not sit idle, who at least on the surface was making good use of you. Her time, I knew I looked hot. Yes, I am hot. But never in all our years together have I been as fit as I am now. Hell, he even licked his lips. Well, he was going to, until he changed his mind, and looked at the boatmen with such a stern expression that he looked at the lake behind him for a long time. Danny, I knew that something like this was waiting for me, but I also thought that it was waiting for me inside. Beatty chuckled, and then pulled a long, thick robe out of the boat. Hold it, I think there's no point in delaying. Put this on and get on the boat. I didn't think twice about putting it on, even though the clothes now seemed strange. But my husband wasn't done. He cupped my face as I tightened the belt, forcing me to look at him. For the last time, Dana Allen, do you agree? Do you realize that I am about to take you on a journey that you know nothing about, and that I am going to make demands that you cannot predict? Last chance. Yes, he removed his hand. No, right here and now there will be no room for anything. I swallowed, and she made a decision. History is my mortal enemy, so all I can do is try to pierce its heart. I reached out and took Beatty's huge, calloused hands in my smooth little, right here, right now, I promise that everything in me, everything that's left of my damn soul is dedicated to this, you, and I will hold on to this as long as possible. My little act of bravery faltered slightly, and I let go of his hands. Well, if it makes any difference to you at all, I think we'll find out. His beautiful, boyish smile barely appeared on his face, but we're off to a good start. I'll miss the usual stuff. The ride on Virginia's yacht was pleasant but quiet, and the same could be said for the time it took to get out of the lake, down the Lee River, and out into the ocean. To be honest, I was just waiting for them to show me what would happen next. As we sailed along the coast, Beatty finally began, and did so by coming up behind me as I looked out at the water at the bow of the ship, leaning down so that his lips were right next to my ear. Relax, yes? I sighed and nodded, leaning slightly against his large body. Calmly he paused, boring, dead to be honest. My eyebrows furrowed in confusion and I turned my head slightly, trying to catch his gaze. Biddy, what you realize that neither you nor I will ever be anything special, right? When I tried to turn completely, he only allowed me to see the ship. In a general sense, I mean, I'm a contractor, you are a school teacher. We can change course a little, move a little, but not in some flashy Hollywood way. He waved his hand, pointing to the yacht. Borrowed luxury is the best I can give. My sister is big and bright. I couldn't afford this in 5 lifetimes. With me, you can't either. Then I began to understand what he was leading to, and relaxed. Okay, Biddy snorted slightly. Okay, think about it carefully. Life is full of change. Always in motion, always flowing from one point to another, always moving forward. No, it's not in the cards. You will never be the object of everyone's admiration. Your image will not appear on the internet. You will not become a gossip hero. To everyone else, it's as if you were never born. His voice dropped, and we both know that such. Insignificance is not your thing. I had to fight and fight desperately to keep his hands from letting go of my shoulders and clinging to him like a scared little baby monkey. I knew just by the tone of his voice what my husband wanted from me: sobriety, a restrained, even cold answer to his unresolved question. Attractiveness. No, you're right, Biddy. It doesn't appeal to me. It pulls me. What you're describing is rebirth, returning to the starting point, giving up the false gold that I was chasing, trampling everyone in my path, giving up the slow death I would have accepted if I had stayed. I realized I didn't want to say the name that hung between us both, as if saying it would cause worlds to collide before we were ready. I just put my hands on his. You just described something I didn't know I absolutely needed until I was already spitting it out. Now I have to wipe it off and put it back in place. It's like my happy old quiet lifestyle. You know what I mean, right? God, all these metaphors and stuff are getting hard to understand. My nervous laugh was a picture of nervousness, but his laugh was genuine, and it was very, very nice. But you are a literature teacher. My laughter became dead. No, I'm not a teacher, not anymore. When he didn't answer, I tried to fill the silence. I am nothing. His fingers lightly squeezed my shoulders. This is good. I tensed up. I couldn't help myself. Is it good to be nothing? What the hell does that mean? The man I married wouldn't think twice about appeasing me. I wouldn't think about support and encouragement. This new Beatty wasn't the same, not anymore. And then it dawned on me. He didn't talk about going back to where we started, about putting on our old life as if we found it, in the back of a closet ready for us to come home to. No, he was describing a future that might look like the past, but was completely different. His only purpose in this little exchange of words was to let me know what not to expect. Completely. Make sure I kill all, I don't know, ambition. I guess I had to remove myself from my own future. I want to go to bed. I went limp in his arms. And I know he felt it. Please. Beatty did not answer, but stepped aside. I wanted to pull him with me to my cabin, only mine. But that would be like asking me to fly into space on the back of a magical unicorn that farts rainbows. Pure childishness. This was not, of course, knowing what reality is not did not help me at all to understand what reality. I felt his weight drop onto the bed and then felt his hard body. It's cliché, I know, but I really thought it was a dream. I didn't see him for the next 3 days, and those 3 days hurt, I'm serious. I felt physical pain, nausea, and heartburn in turns, and feeling like my skull was going to split open. I don't know how he did it, but he managed to avoid me while I wandered around Virginia's gorgeous but not big enough yacht, lost and miserable. The sea air didn't help. The few crew members, no matter how hard they tried to be understanding, could have been dummies. My brain seemed more wobbly than the ship beneath my feet. I kept asking myself the same question, over and over again. What else does he want? Apologizing forever. Make me cry until I'm dehydrated. Write an epic poem about poor, lost, broken Dana Allen. The thing is, I would do it. I would do all this and more if only Beatty would let me know what else he expects from me. This uncertainty that I found myself in was unbearable because it seemed like a giant step backwards, almost to the place where I started this nightmare at Lucian's mansion, a place where I was so confused that I didn't really understand what was waiting for me around every corner. Then at least I had a lie to feed myself. Now I have nothing left but fruitless questions. I really started to think I couldn't handle it, that I can't live with this ambiguity, with desperate pleas into the void that were never answered. I began to come to terms with the grim fact that I was alone and would remain so. I started but didn't accept it. Strange, but it was the reflection of the sun on the ocean that gave my jelly-like soul strength. It looked like a bloody ball. I mentioned that I was in a bad state. There is no need for any lofty phrases about true love or a happy life. What was really missing? What was missing from me and what was lost? One answer was immediately clear. I no longer had balance. Everything was skewed. Up to this point, all I had done to correct my mistakes was say a lot of words. I said them sincerely, but that was not enough. They didn't weigh anything. When I was a teacher, I sometimes let my students grade their own work. This is a good way to get them to really think about themselves. It didn't work for everyone, though. There were always guys who gave themselves an excellent grade and went to doze off. But those who were truly worthwhile did it right. The most successful ones gave themselves a satisfactory rating. That's what I was missing, understanding. I needed to look inside myself, take stock, and accept what I knew I would find. Inside, a big pile of crap. But not only crap, there was still something there that I could lean on to get through this shit, and that something was true or something. And the truth was that Beatty, the wonderful man that he was, owed me absolutely nothing. I burned all my bridges. I destroyed everything to the ground. I did my best to destroy everything around me. The point is that I had to accept that there was a good chance that he would leave anyway, and never look back, and he would be right to do so. I had to let go of all expectations and fill myself with only the hope that my battle would be won. I had to fight. The thing is, I knew I could fight. I knew I would. But I didn't know if I would have a chance. So screw it all. I just had to be ready. The next day the yacht moored. The life I knew, the person I was, ended that day. I didn't know where we were, except that it was a medium-sized island, but I didn't need to know that. Beatty reappeared, dressed in casual jeans and a t-shirt, almost as soon as the ship was secured and the ramp lowered. He walked straight towards me, with an expression I couldn't read. I might as well have looked for answers in the horoscope. It was so secretive. However, no matter what he thought, he did not hesitate when he approached. "I want you to change into something fancy," he shrugged. "Hell, maybe even something sexy. Virginia has specially selected several outfits for you, so I have no doubt that you will find what you need when you see it." Despite everything churning inside me at the sight of him, I simply nodded and turned around to head towards the pantry. There wasn't anything of note in the closet in my cabin, so I knew this was the place to look. As soon as I walked in, I immediately noticed this: a scarlet dress with a tight skirt, a side slit to the waist, and a neckline so low that my breasts would fall out if I sneezed. I felt so fragile that I could break into pieces. It was the same dress, recreated of course, but perfectly similar, the same one I wore the night Beatty sent his sister to rescue me. I'm proud of my reaction. My nostrils widened a little. My fingers trembled a little, and yet I put it on. I was told to. Dear God, this journey back was so hard. Even the moment when Beatty wets her lips at the sight of my appearance was not worth the shame I felt as I returned in my funeral attire. Squinting his eyes slightly, he motioned for me to walk along the wooden boardwalk that led from the beautiful beach into a small forest. The walk took no more than 10 or 15 minutes, but there was silence the whole time, until we almost reached the last turn. Beatty stopped in front of me, causing me to stop abruptly. Although his face remained as emotionless as it was, I knew him well enough to know that he was about to say something. After a second's pause, he struck. "Dana, what I'm about to say is 100% true. I don't know if we have a future together. In fact, I haven't seen anything to indicate that we have it. I love you, you know it. But what you did," he cracked slightly, and it took all my self-control to stay still. "There is no turning back after this. Just know, Beatty." I didn't know what to say, didn't know if there was any appropriate answer at all. But the pain with which that lonely word sounded must have shown him something. God, I just had to. Maybe she did, but if so, it wasn't enough to stop him. He gritted his teeth and then simply spat out the rest like an unsightly stone. Pointing down the bend ahead, "Someone is waiting for you to come back. So go, continue on your way." No, just no. He couldn't say what he seemed to say. I unconsciously grabbed the scarlet dress that tightly hugged my damn useless body. I felt pain in my fingers from the desire to tear it into pieces, to get rid of it, of what it symbolized, of the memory it was now bound to forever. I wanted it so badly because at that moment my broken mind was sure that this dress was a totem that had cast a spell on Beatty, turning him into the personification of cruelty necessary to deliver me back into the arms of that being from whom I thought I ran away. Lucian, damn my life. Beatty was no longer with me. I lost. He gave me back to the monster because he knew I didn't deserve anything better. I don't know how he did it, but Lucian was here, and now it's over. What could I do? Beg. Throw yourself at him and beg like a child. No. Beatty deserved. He deserved my composure, my faith in him. My war was over and I had lost. All that remains is to decide what to do after the surrender. You know, like Andrew Jackson. The last steps around the bend weren't as difficult as they could have been. If I was being cast out, I had to accept it, but I didn't have to land where others expected. I could change my trajectory and find my own path, one outcast. But me, if I had only myself, well, so be it, no matter how much I wanted the opposite. Batty stood motionless and watched me, so I looked at him one last time, and then followed his last order. My gaze lingered on him as my legs carried me further, but in the end the turn carried him away from my life. Ahead, the deck ended in a clearing, adorned with soft light and a delicately carved arch covered in ivy. Everything looked so damn picturesque, and I wanted to puke. I looked at it and thought it was looking back at me, the eye of a warrior wounded in battle. Yes, I know. I've gone a little crazy. It's not even worth talking about. In any case, this idle thought led to not-so-idle thoughts. Warrior. The warrior fights. A warrior remains true to himself, or he is no longer a warrior. The warrior endures. He is not driven to victory by any guarantee, but only by the need to protect what is worth protecting and the simple hope that he can do so. And this was the key idea. No, I didn't start thinking of myself as a battle-hardened fighter. I just started thinking, cold and calm, what am I fighting for? My eyes squeezed shut as the soft light touched them, but I took a few more steps before stopping, placing my hands on my hips. Listen to me carefully, you piece of. He didn't listen. He didn't listen because it wasn't him at all. Virginia retreated with a contented sigh, not at all bothered by the interrupted passion. Her smiling face filled my field of vision, a vision in itself. Perfect. This is an elegant, strong nose, that sculpted jaw, these mesmerizing whirlpools, which perhaps would be called eyes by others, less mortals. Oh my God, she was absolutely stunning. I love you, Danny. My sister-in-law pulled away a little further, but still held my hands in hers, clearly not wanting to let go. And I want you so much. Her fingers went from lightly holding my hands to intertwining them between my fingers, and she leaned in too quickly and lightly, relatively lightly, to kiss me. Again, I didn't move. This is not a trick. I swear by everything that is good in the world. I mean every word. I've always wanted you, and I've been in love with you for years. Her eyes were full of tears, and her smile was shaking. I want to be with you in every sense of the word. If you say yes, you will have me, all of me. We will share one life, and everything that one of us has, the other will have. She took another step closer. Forever. I will never leave you. I will never reject you. I will recognize your every trait, and together we will create one thing. I say this with all my soul. I wasn't prepared for this. How could I have been? It never crossed my mind that my incredible sister-in-law could feel this way. That's all there is to it, in love with me, offering a life I'd never even imagined, full of security, physical fulfillment, spiritual connection, and friendship at its peak. It seemed absurd, but on the other hand, it made sense. After all, she came to me at Lucien's house to save me, and she never backed down. She was my guide through a place where she was almost condemned, where she was subjected to temptation after temptation, probably experiencing despair that I didn't know about. For my sake, for love, different kinds of love. Jin. I rolled her name on my lips as if I was tasting it, and ran my fingers over her flushed toward cheek. I love you so much. Oh, Danny, she hugged my waist. Her smile was somehow tinged with both sadness and joy. It was surreal. The worst is over. Maybe, maybe not. My voice began to tremble, but you won't know it. I had to push her hard to get out of her arms, and the lost, puzzled look on her face tore my heart. However, I took a step back, one more. I didn't look away, just as I didn't want to. I owed her at least this. I'm Batty Allen's wife. I gave every ounce of my being to him. One more step, even if he never finds out. Virginia shuddered and wrapped her arms around herself, but said nothing and did not move. So trying to convey through my expression how much I hated hurting her, I took it one step further, or tried to. I couldn't finish this movement because I ran into a brick wall that seemed to appear behind me out of nowhere. Seeing the confusion on my face, Virginia finally smiled again. I love you, both of you, always. Then she turned her back to me. I, too, turned and screamed like a frightened mouse as I was lifted from the ground and carried forward, past poor angelic Virginia, past the I-arch, further until I was taken to a nice bungalow and laid on a bed as soft as a cloud. Beatty. Oh, my Beatty. Are you listening? Everyone here is the whole point of all of this. The most important part of the story. Listen and hear me. Beatty was the light. He was everything that glows, kind, pure, warm, illuminating, observing, and giving life. He stood over me, and for a moment my foggy senses convinced me that he had descended from heaven right now, even though I had just clutched his old t-shirt as he carried me here. I think I moaned out loud, wanting to express what I knew I should, but it took several long seconds for it to come out. I don't have an ounce of confidence in myself, Beatty. He bowed his beautiful head slightly but did not turn away. In response, I sat up and pulled off this terrible dress, exposing my body to him. Without stopping there, I grabbed the scissors from the bedside table and cut the dress into pieces. He was still watching me curiously, as naked as I was, as I handed him the pieces of destroyed fabric. Except for one, and then lay back on the bed. I tied that same piece of fabric in front of my eyes. Tie it tightly, my love, my husband, I am yours. And this is not just a romantic metaphor. I mean that completely. I am yours. And in saying this, I'm asking, please understand this. Dana, I didn't see him, but I imagined his look first confused and then no longer. Not at all. I understand he laughed briefly. Trust, I laughed quietly in response. I don't have it. Not to myself. I've used it up. Ha, and even more. So now I need his reflection. I don't trust myself, but I trust you. I trust you until death and beyond. If I give you everything, I will know that my future is secure. That's what I'm asking for. I felt a shiver run through every millimeter of my skin, your complete dominance, and I will never stop being like that. Danny looked carefully at each member of her family, lingering on each in turn. And if you try to make me stop, you'll be dead to me. She leaned back a little in her chair and exhaled slowly. That's it. This is history. She risked a small smile. She loved her family. She really did. And she never wanted to upset them. She still hoped that she could somehow improve the situation. The ending isn't so bad, right? Not what you thought. While her brother stared into space and the Alonzos exchanged glances, her father fumed. Danny's mother stood up and began pacing the room. Danny, I don't even know. There's too many things. Of course it's terrible. Maybe Tina should have patted herself on the back for at least giving her mother a chance to say a few words after the story, but no one did, especially not Danny. Not after her little sister rushed forward, close to her. This is the craziest thing I've ever heard. Biddy damn Danny, don't you understand? He brainwashed you or somehow set you up or something else. I don't know, he broke your head. He turned you into his damn slave, and you know it. Yes, Danny blinked. Didn't you listen? That's the whole point. Tina snorted, although she stopped waving her arms. It wasn't necessary. You scratched an itch by cutting off your own hand. God. Danny stood up, looking at her sister with calm eyes. You said it yourself. Biddy is my God. Dios Senora Alonso recoiled slightly, and her husband again clutched his golden cross. Girl, don't say things like that. Sorry, Senora A., but it's true. Danny tried to smile as reassuring as possible. Look, you've known me all my life. I'm not religious. None of us are religious. I don't know, after all this, I feel like I need to read some Hail Marys or something. Frank winced. Something more cleansing than just taking a shower, that's for sure. Danny rolled her eyes. Shut up, merry fellow. She turned again to her kind neighbors. What do I mean? Okay, please, if you don't mind, tell me how you feel when you worship. This time Mr. Alonso spoke first. Pacification, confidence. He continued to fiddle with the small man, gold cross on his neck. Understanding. We know with every part of us that everything will be fine. Some memory, Danny guessed, came to Senora Alonso's mind, and she had to wipe away a day tear. Even when the worst thing that can happen happens, it's not the end. It's not the end, because someone is making sure it doesn't happen. At the same time, both elderly spouses extended their hands to each other and squeezed them tightly. Danny felt a lump in her throat for a moment, just watching their experiences, and she had to take a break. It's me. Now, sorry, but I still don't believe in some higher supernatural entity or whatever it is. But everything you just said is a feeling. She laughed quietly. Now it's me. I finally got it. Frank shook his head, opening his mouth. Sorry, little sister, but I'm still there. Somewhere on the moon. I can't understand it. Danny's eyes lit up with cunning. Fine. I will explain it so that your depraved nature will understand. Simple and rude. I am ready to do anything, submissive to my man who needs to dominate me. I didn't know this about myself before, but now I do. I don't know how this appeared to me, and I don't want to know. It's there and I love it. BD is my Lord and Master, and I kneel before him at every opportunity. Clear? Crystal. Frank turned pale. You can take me off your list of those who need to be convinced. Please, and thank you very much. There must be another way to fix this. Tina was not going to give up. Just give yourself completely to your husband. Danny, this is crazy. This, is a huge leap from what can be called good and healthy. Do you love Jackson? The older sister's question caught Tina off guard, and she had to work with her mouth a little before answering. I love you, I love my husband completely, and he loves me. Danny nodded. Yes, he loves me, I see it, everyone sees it. The rest of the table nodded, albeit a little slowly. You two are made for each other. For some reason, just last week, he told me Tina snorted. Jackson doesn't tell me anything. He would never. Danny pointed her finger at her triumphantly. Exactly, you are in command, and we all know it. The nods of the others, albeit with some reluctance, confirmed her rightness. Tina, you, Jackson, and your children all understand that Mom is in charge. It works. Your home is full of love and warmth, and no one would want to change that. Jackson is really great in a lot of ways, but it's like he can't. Tina trailed off, suddenly thinking about some new things. Why then is it so difficult to believe that the same thing is possible for me, but only in reverse? Because that was never you before, and it shouldn't be you now. It shouldn't be anyone. Not to this extent. Her father finally spoke. At least he refrained from making threats for now. What you did was wrong, but this level of submission is a disease. His fists clenched with a crunch as he uttered the last words. This is wrong, and it needs to stop. Her mother stood next to her father, showing her solidarity. Danny, look at it this way. You are no longer you. You are nothing. The way we saw you allow your husband to control your every move. The way you seem simply terrified of being away from him in a crowd was the reason for this ... interference, or whatever you want to call it. And this in itself is quite significant. Everything you told us, how can we just accept it? She fiddled with her hands. The world doesn't work like that, you know? Mom, Dad, I love you, but you need to get your heads out of your asses. Danny ran her hands over her face in obvious disappointment. You didn't listen, or you only heard what you wanted, but either way, you ignored the harsh reality in order to continue to look at me through the prism of parental expectations. I was a terrible person. I have done things that cannot be forgotten and should not be forgotten. Never, not for a moment. I now live in a state of, how shall I say, a state of eternal grace. Perhaps that's the best description. Beatty forgives me every day because I humiliate myself in front of him every day. And I will continue to do so every single day until the end of time. At the end of our nightmare, my husband got his way. Her father narrowed his gaze. What does it mean? Danny closed her eyes and took a deep breath, enjoying the moment, by your existence. Now he can exercise the highest form of domination of one person over another. Complete forgiveness. Danny's mother continued to shake her head, looking to the others for support. Although they were deep in thought, she found no support, but she still couldn't just leave it like that. This can't be right. It just can't. Danny walked up to her parents and placed a hand on their shoulders. It's not some big statement about life for society or gender roles or anything like that. Although I will say this, I would be sick if I heard another woman say the same thing. I said without the story I went through. If I saw a man treat a dog the way Beatty treats me, I would probably kick the man. Why? Because the dog didn't ask for it. Danny took a step back and spread her arms to embrace everyone present. This is something that you all cannot accept, and it is insulting. I want. My husband, despite the fact that he had every right to abandon me, still raised me and elevated me to heaven so that I could stay next to him. How can you not want this for me? Please, for the love of God, don't make me. Can I come in? All heads turned at the same time to see Beatty carefully entering through the unlocked front door. He smiled from ear to ear and even licked his lips. Sorry for being so sudden, but when Danny told me that Mommy made her signature peanut pie again, I just couldn't. I had to. He froze when he saw a wall of ice in front of him. Understood. Apparently today is the day, right? As if they had coordinated this in advance. Beatty opened his arms the same moment Danny rushed towards him, and as she collided with his chest, he closed his arms around her, hugging her as tightly as he could. Owner, defender, what have they decided about me, my love? He whispered the question into her hair as she buried her face in his chest. I don't know, but they're not happy. She squeezed him tighter and wrapped one leg around his leg, not out of desire, but simply to get even closer to him. Will you forbid me to see them again? Sighs and even groans of horror were heard throughout the room. The question was asked calmly and honestly, as if Danny was asking if they were going to grab something to eat on the way home. Without a plea, without even a hint of concern, she was simply waiting for his answer. And everyone in the room knew at that moment that this would be the last word, whatever it was. They love you, Danny. Beatty looked at everyone confidently, then fixed his gaze on Father Danny. They are even willing to sacrifice for you. The old man, no longer in good shape, although he didn't want to admit it, watched his son-in-law, in particular behind his calloused, rough working hands with which he held his daughter so tightly, the hands that she talked about and showed that she didn't want to be separated from for a second longer than necessary, hands that made her incredibly happy, or just happy. I would sacrifice everything. Her father growled, I would have lost everything, without a doubt, but you don't have to do that. Beatty kept his eyes on his father-in-law, but gently stroked Danny's back. Just give me a piece of that trust that your daughter gives me, and everything will be fine. He watched his first baby closing his eyes, trembling like a leaf, completely unable to tear himself away from his owner and move towards her. Somehow, in an unspoken family manner, everyone surrendered this moment to him. The next minute he became a patriarch like never before. And he was going to decide. He extended his fleshy paw and took what he needed. I trust her. Beatty's grin as he shook his father-in-law's hand twice just in case was ferocious. Victory. Then shaking hands, he snorted once. So I take it there's actually no pie. Danny's mom giggled a little. Come tomorrow, I'll bake it. Then a slight sob escaped her, and she put several fingers to her mouth. I'll make it big enough for both of you because you're together. Her voice dropped. Her lips twitched into a smile. You're still together. Beatty simply nodded, tilted his head, and whispered something to Danny. She slowly lifted her face from his chest and grinned at him, then turned to her family. Now he will take me home. Her smile appeared again in front of them all. See you soon. I love you all. The family watched the couple, leave in silence, heard quiet talk about an upcoming trip to Virginia, and remained calm. From the lowest of lows to the highest of peaks, they were taken on Danhouse's journey, and it required them to pay. They had to live with a newfound awareness that nothing in life fits into a box or can be organized into a list, that the best of us can fall and the worst of us can rise. Sometimes the best of us and the worst of us were the same person. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story. Because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one, 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 click to the next one.